Welcome to UpTalk, Graham. It's a pleasure to finally get you here.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I know we've been trying to schedule this, going back and forth for so long, and I've had so many people over that time, message me and say, you got to have this guy on, and this program is so awesome. So I can't wait to hear about it.
Oh, well, thanks very much. I appreciate the sentiments already.
Well, first I want to learn a bit about you, obviously, and reading your short bio you gave me, there's a lot to talk about for sure. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born an Army brat, so I was actually born on a Canadian Forces base in Germany, but eventually we repatriated back to Canada. When I was 10 years old, we did an accompanied posting back to the Middle East for a year, and then after that posting, we eventually, after a couple of moves, ended up in the Niagara area, where I guess I would say I had my formative, teenage and high school years type of thing. So My hometown is Niagara, but 5 or 6 different places before that proverbial hometown became hometown.
Now, looking back now, how did you find that, all the moving around, being an Army brat, as you said?
Well, kind of looking back now, I realized there may have been certain things in my childhood that may have made me more perceptible more receptive to PTSD in my adult years. But at the time, it was kind of a great sense of adventure, and we were out traveling the world. When we were in Israel, we were actually in the bomb shelters on 2 different occasions, and had to get evacuated out of our the town we were living on 2 different occasions. So it was definitely we were in a area that was strife with emotion and politics, we'll say.
So, I mean, obviously, then it was an easy transition for you, or a segue into the Canadian Forces for you. Then, obviously, it was a family thing.
Oh, absolutely. When we eventually, arrived in Niagara, and I started attending high school. 17 years old, went and joined the Lincoln and Welland Regiment, which is an area reserve regiment with the Canadian Forces, and did my training there in the military at 17 years of age, and then at 19 years of age, in '89, deployed over to Cyprus for a United Nations peacekeeping tour.
Wow. So, looking back on that now, I mean, so you said you're 19, you're doing this, you're overseas. How was that for you? Like, were you loving it? Was there, how'd you like it?
United Nations peacekeeping tours are kind of, there are a lot of monotony and boredom. There's a lot of politics with the United Nations as far as rules of engagement and stuff like that.
Right.
We were there basically to maintain the status quo, which if you even look at what that means, it's just make sure nothing changes. So it's that tour wasn't highly volatile or anything like that. At that point in time, Canada had already been performing peacekeeping missions to Cyprus for, I think it was ongoing to 27 years at that point in time. So we were there for a long time. There have, of course, been major flare-ups along the way, but we didn't have any specifically during our time. There was one incident that I was involved with where my patrol partner, we were doing a staggered patrol. My patrol partner got taken captive by one of the combative forces in the area. That led to a 3-day discussions with New York City and stuff like that, and eventually his release was negotiated through political channels. But that incident still deeply affected me. And so after that incident, about 2 weeks later, it was our time to kind of repatriate back to Canada.
Right.
Our tour was over. So we kind of had that incident, then went back to Canada, and a couple weeks later, I was back to reserve status, and back basically living life.
So were there any, when you came back, were there any discussions about that incident?
Oh no, we at that point in time there were no critical discuss debriefs or anything like that. There wasn't any sort of debrief. except for a operational or tactical debrief, what was done right and wrong. But from a psychological
Right.
standpoint, we never.
No one like come up to you and ask you how you were or how you're dealing with it?
It may have happened. I've been told that I didn't really speak to anybody for about 3 or 4 days. I don't actually have a memory of the incident.
Right.
I know what transpired in the same way that I know what transpired on D-Day, but I wasn't there.
Right.
I have 2 or 3 kind of snapshots in my brain, and that's the only recollection I have of that incident.
Okay, so you come back and you're a reservist. Do you get deployed again? Do you do any other overseas work?
Nope. No, that was pretty much my only overseas deployment. When I arrived back, I should point out that while I was deployed over there, my brother had been hired as a police officer, and he was writing me letters saying what an amazing time he was having, like the proverbial movie,
Right.
Foot chases and car chases and just doing all the high adventure stuff that the law enforcement career can offer you. And I was coming back from arguably that a conflict area, we'll say,
Right.
and that sounded like a lot of fun. And there's a natural progression, it seems, from military into law enforcement. It's kind of the same sort of lifestyle. And I always knew I would kind of be drawn or attracted to some sort of emergency services work. So when my brother said he was having a really worthwhile and rewarding time being a police officer, I ended up applying as well. And by the end of the year, got hired. So about 9 months later into the hiring process, the way we started.
So what year would that have been that you got hired with police?
I deployed overseas in '89, returned in 1990, and got hired late 1990.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As a police officer.
Okay. So you start doing that. And then, how were the first few years in that? Were you loving it?
Oh, absolutely. From my 4th shift on, we ended up going to a fairly major call. And while that call kind of was my, baptism of fire, or, Graham can be kind of relied upon in a heavy call. Looking back now at that call, I realized, like, on my 4th shift, I was like, that call, looking back on it, like, was just abject terror.
Yeah.
Looking at it, when I was in the moment, I thought it was great and everything like that, because there's that adrenaline thing. But after that one call, it was like, well, and it wasn't only till years later that I realized, kind of examining that call, what I thought was like that, I had my first quote awesome call.
Yeah.
And then you're looking back going, wow, that whole time I was involved in that call, looking back now, that was sheer terror the entire time. Like, we were, not to get all trauma talk, but, we were literally fighting for somebody's life there.
Right.
One of our own, per se. And, we got the save, so it's a big win. But looking back at it now, going, that could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. I know.
So,
sorry, I know from reading your bio. So you ended up being diagnosed with PTSD in 2012. Is that right?
Correct, sir.
So, how long before that? Because often when we look back, like you said, things usually have started way before we actually get diagnosed.
Absolutely. In retrospect, looking back at me as a young officer, I was always very committed, almost to the point of being, trying to find the word here. I was very committed to officer safety and to training.
Right.
I always knew there was like a high level of energy. I always call it like a chaos energy. I was always looking for meditation or self-hypnosis. I always knew there was something frantic with me. And it seems my entire police career, I was always searching for, the martial art or the yoga or the hypnosis or any sort of thing that could just kind of quiet my brain.
Yeah.
In 2013, I went to a major traumatic call where a young child was struck by lightning. Life-saving efforts did not prove in the end did not work.
Right.
And that call deeply affected me. From then on, I went from being uniform patrol and, of course, saying I have to get off the road. I got myself transferred into the detective bureau.
Right.
Which arguably now covers every high priority call.
Yeah. How is that better? How is that a better option for you?
But in my mind, I wasn't on the road
right
anymore. So did the criminal investigations again for a number of years, and then in 2015 had another major traumatic call involving a starvation death of a young girl in Brampton, and the ensuing criminal trial process in regards to that. And that call really affected me. It like rocked me to my core. So I knew I had to get off of, now not off the road, I had to get out of frontline policing. So I eventually got myself transferred into our organizational wellness bureau, which is essentially the policy center for mental health for our agency.
I mean, through these years that you're going through these transitions, and you're starting to realize the weight of your career, I mean, what's happening in your personal life? What does that look like? Because usually that's chaos.
In my personal life, at this point in time, I've got 3 ex-wives.
Right.
Here in the now. So my personal life was basically falling apart by being on the job. I think 5 years. I'd already been married and divorced. My second marriage probably would have ended shortly after 2002. I ended up having a 14-year marriage to my current wife, and to be quite honest, I think it honestly was the PTSD and my lack of awareness and lack of knowledge,
right,
in how my behaviors were affecting people. But yeah, my personal life was a shambles.
But at the time, Graham, like, I don't know if this is the same for you, but I've often talked about this. At the time, when we're in those relationships, we think that we're killing it. We think that we're the best partner, maybe like the best parent, the best friend, until we get diagnosed and until things fall apart. Then we look back and realize that we were horrible to live with. Is that the same sort of scenario for you?
Oh, absolutely. I can recall a conversation at the end of my first marriage where I'm like, and literally exactly what you said. I was actually lamenting, like, oh yeah, this is going good. The way we've got this, the way we have our marriage going. And she's like, are you kidding? I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So it was.
And we're totally blindsided. We're totally surprised by that. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't see it. Or I wasn't willing to admit that it was me. We can always find a reason, probably for my entire career, I knew I was sick or not healthy or not well. But any of the individual symptoms in and of themselves, you can deflect onto something else, poor sleep. Yeah, I'm a shift worker, that type of thing. So, and you don't really ever want to reconcile. You've heard PTSD and stuff like that, but we kind of have this image of Hollywood that people with PTSD are, shooting up towns, and the original Rambo First Blood was probably society's first real exposure to somebody with PTSD, and a small town had to burn for that one. So I wasn't doing any things like that. I was more into the self-loathing type of thing, and shame. I became very isolated and a loner. My alcoholism was rampant. I was. Was
that your form of self-medicating? Was the alcohol?
Oh, absolutely. And at that point in time, it was so enshrined with that law enforcement culture, that so-called work hard, play hard, don't discuss your feelings. Heavy drinkers are kind of held in high regard, or at least they were in the 90s. So me being a heavy drinker, it wasn't a huge issue for anybody around me. It was just kind of.
It was how you did it. It was just part of the deal.
Absolutely.
Right? So you transitioned into this wellness department, and it's part of the police force, right?
Correct.
So once you got in there, how did things change for you, if they did?
So when I got into organizational wellness, keep in mind, I was already diagnosed. I was in therapy every week,
Right.
which I don't think I've ever missed a therapy session. So I was responsible for our peer support team, our critical incident response team. I was responsible for placing officers that came forward with PTSD on any available treatment programs that we can find for them, which arguably there weren't a lot at that point in time, and arguably still aren't.
What year was this, Graham, that you transitioned into this department?
I think 2015, 2016.
Did a lot of departments have this kind of thing at that time? Because I'm thinking now that it must have been pretty unique.
It was my agency at one point in time was kind of leading the charge in regards to mental health benefits. We were one of the first agencies to set up our peer support team, and that was set up by Sean McCowell and a couple of others.
Okay.
And he still does training for peer support teams, including Boots on the Ground, another an amazing organization.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Shout out to.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, absolutely. So I just lost my train of thought there. Damn PTSD.
That's okay.
Can you give me a 10-second rewind there?
Yeah. So it happens to me all the time, brother. It's part of the deal. So
yeah, I just say rewind and somebody will shout out where I was 10 seconds ago. No, but I don't do well. But on that subject, for a while I used to try to bluff my way through, and I found I was just sounding like a babbling idiot because I couldn't get myself on track. And people are like looking at me like, "Wow, like we're." Now I don't allow the stigma of PTSD, like that brain fog and the concentration. If I lose my train of thought, I just go, "Hey, brother, I need a 10-second rewind." And you say, "We were talking about this," and that'll usually click me right back in, and away we get to talking that. So,
I mean, so we're talking about your work in that department. First of all, that's wicked that you had that opportunity. And
so
how did
my agency was always on the forefront for that. We were one of the first to implement what's known as a psychological safeguarding. So we had other programs that would track certain like complaints and use of force reports. And they would sometimes indicate, hey, this officer might be having an issue because there's been a rise in certain markers. And then we would, have somebody reach out to the officer and say, hey, you doing okay? If there's anything you need, let us know.
Right.
We had another program for our Special Services Bureau, like our high-speed investigators, homicides and stuff like that. Where they would have to do a interview with the psychologist every year, as well as some testing to see if they were picking up traumas in that. So with the implementation of that program, we realized that, we were implementing that program with the thought that we were going to have a high success rate. And from almost day one of us implementing that safeguarding program, a lot of our officers were coming out and the psychologists were saying, these officers are all being affected. So we started to realize the true scope of what it was, because a lot of our frontline officers just were the point where they weren't fit for duty due to stressors in their life.
And then when did you, because you've done so many things, at what point did you go and get your master's of counseling in psychology?
It was about at this time. I was looking for something to do. That sounds like I was looking for something to do, so I took a master's. No, I'd been kind of researching. I wanted to go back to school. I was just trying to find a program that was a good fit. I was originally looking at a master's in leadership, but then I ended up switching over, and I basically, it was literally probably a Facebook ad for Yorkville University for a master's in counseling and psychology. And I kind of knew, because where I was kind of shifting my efforts and stuff like that, I knew I was going to be dealing one-on-one with people in that. And I mean, I'd always had a problem with, the $2,000 suit or the lab coat person at the front of the room telling me something that they didn't necessarily have a connection with. Yeah. And I didn't want to be the same person who was, quote, kind of doing pseudo counseling and not have a credential with that. So I took my schooling in regards to counseling. At this point in time, I had the PTSD, so I had the credibility of having the injury. I'd worn 3 of the 4 uniforms. I'd been in the military. I had the blue police uniform, and then I was also a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah.
For various points of time of that. So I kind of had the connection and the lingo that I could talk to the various demographics.
Right.
And I find that just like it was an amazing program. I learned so much about myself, as well as the mental health landscape and that. And all of my papers were all centered on PTSD in the emergency services demographic. So I found myself kind of almost doing a deep dive into the PTSD and that. And I'd been suffering. At this point in time, my life was really starting to spiral. My marriage wasn't going well. My alcoholism was out of control. I believe I was self-medicating with cannabis at the time. I'm not sure exactly when it went legal as that, but I was finding relief in that. And I was basically following the info and following the knowledge. I knew that the reports and studies were out there for cannabis, so I gave it a try, and it seemed to take me down a couple little notches. Like certainly not a cure for PTSD, but
right.
It in the proper circumstancing, medicating with cannabis seemed to have the proper results, and I was able to be effective with that. Eventually, I found that my PTSD was getting too out of control. I was having panic attacks.
Right.
Every 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And to this day, I still do. I would find myself crying at my desk several times a day for no reason. But I became aware of a program that an officer had attended on Project Trauma Support up in Perth, Ontario.
Yeah.
And he said what an amazing experience it was. I asked him to kind of explain it to me, and he said, I don't really know how to explain it. It's just a certain kind of magic.
Yeah.
So I put in a board report, and I started sending our officers to Project Trauma Support. And they all came back with that same thing. It's an amazing program. Can't really describe it to you. It's just there's certain kind of magic in the way that we talk. I eventually got loaded onto the program, and I attended, and just an amazing program.
What year did you attend
and
there?
Again, what's that?
What year were you there?
I think I was cohort like around the 12 or the 13, around there.
Oh, nice.
I was in June 2018.
Excellent. No, I was in December 2016 for me. We were one of the first few, but
Yeah.
You're right in what you say about it. It's just a magical thing.
But for me, the one component that was kind of always missing is the suicide component. It's like that word that no one seems to want to say. It's like Voldemort in the Harry Potter movie franchise. There just wasn't a lot of discussion going on. And I look back at some of my training in law enforcement, like don't even mention the suicide to somebody because it may give them the idea. And I'm like, we're at an attempt call here. How can we say we're giving them the idea when we're questioning? So there was always a lot of confusion and misunderstanding and in regards to that conversation. So I started to examine this at the end of 2018. My panic attacks were too much. I was spiraling out of control, and I ended up, as I say, for about 3 years, I wore business suits every day. And then the very next day, I've worn tracksuits since then. So that was a big transition for me, that loss of kind of identity, the loss of stature, the loss of relevance from just being at home. And, it's certainly not a vacation, because now you're just at home dealing with all the exact same things, except you've got nothing to occupy your mind.
Right.
Arguably your friends and stuff like that are going to be at work. So it's not a matter of saying, your demographic is at work type of thing. So while I was getting my master's and stuff, I kind of knew that this was maybe something that I wanted to start. Project Trauma Support was an amazing program, but it wasn't talking about that suicide. And, not that every program can be everything to all people.
That's right.
There's a certain amount of time and an infinite amount of knowledge to pass on. So we have to be choosing of what we're going to pass on. And every component of what they do is an amazing component. I have absolutely nothing to say negative about them.
Is this sort of where the Valhalla Project of Niagara started to sort of be born?
Yeah, it was kind of swirling in my mind with the credential, with the counseling thing. I knew I never wanted to really do like a full caseload of 60 or 80 clients where I'm servicing every week. I was always looking at working with this sort of demographic. At this point in time, I'd already set up a Wednesday evening PTSD support group, so I was kind of quarterbacking that sort of thing. So I was kind of leading a little tribe of people in their mental health management efforts.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea started swirling around at this point in time. I ran into Sean Bennett, one of the other directors for Valhalla, at a social engagement through our military unit. And we'd never been particularly close in the military. We certainly knew of each other, but it was just kind of like it was just
Right.
slightly different friend circles type thing.
Yeah.
Certainly no animosity, but just ran in different circles type of thing. But he's there with the service dog, so obviously it can't hide the fact that you have PTSD. And I was there with my service dog, so we just kind of started chatting and stuff like that, and our friendship kind of rekindled, and I told him that this is what I was looking to do. So in April of that year, we attended down to California on the Project Sparta program.
Okay.
Another amazing program down in the States. I'm not sure if you've heard of Sparta.
No, tell me about it.
So it's arguably kind of the Nexus program that Project Trauma Support was based on. Same type of demographic. All the facilitators are PTSD emergency services and otherwise. It's run by Philip Folsom, who was Michael Salonius,
yes,
and then another woman who I just can't remember her name, and I apologize. When I remember,
okay.
I will give her a shout out when I do remember it. But they basically did a 5-day retreat program. It's very much based on the warrior ethos.
Right.
And they basically bring a sense of community. It's a number of highly adventurous activities, and basically just that sense of community. But again, there was some storytelling there, which I don't have an issue with. But they never really dealt face to face with the suicide thing. It was there as part of PTSD type of thing, not necessarily a symptom, but definitely part of the PTSD landscape.
Right.
But again, it was that conversation that wasn't being had. And I should rewind this a few years previous to this. I'd had a good friend of mine, Constable Mark Taylor, a good cop, but an even better person. And arguably probably should have been more of a youth counselor or something like that. That was where his life skills should have probably brought him. He was involved with Wells of Hope, had deployed several times to South America to dig wells for impoverished communities. Just an amazing person.
Wow.
And I had a conversation with him last one night, and he was outlaying some issues that he was having. And he left that evening, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm positive there's still a conversation that should have been had there. And unfortunately, we never had an opportunity to have another conversation. He committed suicide 3 days later, which really changed the way that I looked at having those conversations. I felt a tremendous amount of guilt that I hadn't asked that question. All those other things, we all want to take that mantle of guilt on us. But it fundamentally changed the way that I thought about the conversation. And from that day forward, if in the right context, like say you and I were having a conversation, if the subject hasn't naturally come up in the conversation, before I hang up the phone, I'm just going to say, hey, Sean, you suicidal? Yes or no? And it's very simple.
Yeah.
And all you got to say is yes. And I know everything that you're feeling at that point in time, because I know how hard it is to have that conversation where it's like, hey, I got to talk to you about something. I don't know what's going on, and I'm all morbid, and I want to leave the planet. It's a very hard question to communicate. So I started making efforts just to make it real simple. Hey, Sean, suicidal? Nope, I'm good, thanks. And I don't interview or anything like that. Give me an honest. If you want to hide it from me, you certainly can.
That's the way to do it, though. I mean, Graham, I think that's the way to do it, because that's why it doesn't get talked about, is because people don't know how to bring it up, because it's just a weird thing to bring up, right?
I remember when I was an instructor for critical incident stress management, and I remember when we would deal with the suicide intervention portion, and we would get people out of the class to role play, and I'd be like, okay, you are the one that is suicidal. You are the peer support. You're already here at the Tim Hortons. You've already got your coffees, and go. And they found it incredibly difficult. People that were healthy and were there conducting training found it hard to have that conversation.
Right.
Now, how the hell do you have that conversation when you're terrified, you're scared, you're mad, you're enraged, you want to kill yourself, leave the planet? How are you supposed to have, your thoughts aren't making sense.
Right.
How are you supposed to have a logical communication with somebody when you are so fucking scared?
Yeah.
It simply can't happen. We have to change the way where it can just be like a one word type of thing, where, where we can encapsulate that whole 5-minute sentence in 1 or 2 words. And unfortunately, I need help isn't helping, because we're Wonder Woman and Superman when we're at work, and we're the helpers. We're not the ones who ask for help.
Yeah.
We ask for help if we need more resources to solve the situation. And we'll do anything for anybody else except for ourselves.
That's right.
And it's an incredibly hard conversation to have.
So tell me about Valhalla then. So what does Valhalla Project of Niagara look to do?
So when I was the sergeant in organizational wellness, I would have officers coming into my office, all scared. You could see the confusion. It's almost to the point where I can detect PTSD in people. I can sense that energy. Maverick, my service dog, certainly can. So it's like Maverick will be sleeping in my office. All of a sudden his head will perk up, and I'm like, okay, somebody's coming into the office, because
Right.
Maverick can pick up that energy. And next
Absolutely.
thing you know, some huge police officer, and I remember this one poignantly, like a 6'3" or a 6.4 police officer, a tactical officer, all in his gear. And he's going, can I talk to you about something? I'm like, yeah, sure, brother. What do you need? He goes, I don't know what's going on in my life. I feel like I can't make sense of anything. And this is where I usually go, are you crying every day to start your day? And just the look of relief on his face. But he's like, oh my God, you know what I'm going through. I go, yeah, I've cried 5 times today already.
Yeah.
And just that look of relief on their face when they realize somebody else knows what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And can tell me. So I would have this 3 or 4 hour conversation with these people coming into my office, and it was always the kind of same thing. These are the things that are probably going on in your life. These are some simple things you can start to do. And then I would start trying to see if one, project trauma support would be good for them.
Right.
But as with every program, budgets and financial price tags and stuff like that, there's a cost associated to mental health. And I had to write these memos basically asking permission for an officer, asking permission for them to heal. And it would have to go up, and people would have to approve them, and you would have to lay out their life and all the things and stuff like that. And for me, that always, it was a barrier to treatment. It was very stigmatizing. It was, we were begging for money to help them type of thing. And I've always been of the opinion, hey, you sent me to the sandbox, you break your toys, you got to fix them.
Yeah.
And, I say that kind of lighthearted stuff like that, but in all honesty, you have a responsibility as an agent, and now with the presumptive legislation, we know that law enforcement and, all those emergency services, employment issues are dangerous, and they are inherently dangerous, but they're also damaging.
Yeah.
So, that's been covered off now with presumptive legislation, but the amount of fear and misunderstanding was just amazing. So many officers would just kind of say to me, hey, I should maybe come and live with you for a week and kind of see what you kind of did. And I'm like, maybe you should. And that idea started to kind of percolate with me. I'd originally kind of planned, I was going to retire. I've been on 32 years now. I was getting to retirement age. So I was kind of looking at setting up Valhalla into retirement. But the idea started formulating, and I started looking at what I was actually telling people, and it was all the same information. It's the same 4 to 5 hours, just getting them stabilized and trying to tell them what's, quote, the new normal in their world now. 2018, I booked off sick, but I'd been working with a lot of officers and stuff like that and getting them set up. I'd attended, at this point in time, Project Trauma Support, and then I went down to Sparta. And to be quite honest, for the first little while, I was completely languishing at home. I was completely embracing my PTSD. My alcohol consumption was, I don't want to use the term biblical because that might sound like a positive, but it was out of control.
Right.
I was easily drinking a case of beer or a bottle of whiskey or my alcohol of choice. So my marriage had already crumbled and everything like that, and I was basically just languishing for the year. And then COVID arrived, and then 2020 arrived. So 2019, I basically languished, and my PTSD was getting better and better, or worse and worse. I went down to California in April, and it was still getting worse. I started thinking about this program. And as I started planning, because I had some relevance again in my world, like I still wasn't leaving the house, but I was at least active. I was planning. We were trying to shuck and jive and get things going on. And I was starting to get a little bit of confidence. I still wasn't leaving the house. And we started planning how we were going to do this. And we kind of developed it on a 5-day retreat type of thing with various educational components. But we weren't going to have any trauma talk. There wasn't going to be any processing. There wasn't going to be any therapy. That's for the high-paid therapist to do. We were going to give basic skills in regards to surviving suicide. And we were going to have that conversation right off the bat. Okay. Because everybody with PTSD says they have a support network, and they do. Friends and family who are awesome at being friends and family. But we barely understand the PTSD lifestyle, landscape and lifestyle and what's going on. Right. How can we expect somebody else to understand it?
Yeah.
So I found that when I was hanging out with Sean, we had this shared language. I could say, I'm exhausted. I'm having a nap. I'm going to have a nap at 2:00 in the afternoon. Be like, all right, can we call it out? And it was normative the way we were able to now discuss our injury with each other in a non-stigmatizing fashion.
Right.
So we also at this point in time set up a canine training program for service dogs because there weren't a lot available. Sean's wife was a professional dog trainer. So we purchased and started training 7 dogs that we were going to home with veterans and first responders. They would attend our 5-day retreat period, work with their dog while educating themselves in regards to PTSD.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, COVID hit a week before we were about to start. So our retreat got canceled.
Right.
We had 7 dogs in a facility, which we still had to rehome. So we eventually got the dogs placed. COVID being what it was, we weren't able to maintain a training regimen. So sadly, 3 of those dogs are amazing pets in the house that are probably still having very therapeutic benefits, but they're not training at the level of being a service dog.
Right.
Eventually, when COVID kind of settled in, we all kind of took that first 2-3 weeks and said, okay, we'll stay at home. And then I started getting bored and agitated, and just the isolation was just destroying me.
Right.
It hadn't really changed my life between pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's just that the rest of the world was a bunch of grumpy pricks to join me as well. Yeah. And when I did find that I could escape from my house for, maybe go get lunch or something, things were open. So now with COVID, they weren't. So in order to stay relevant, we basically converted what was going to be the in-person material into into a Zoom program.
Okay.
And we cover several components such as, we talk bare bones about what an anxiety attack feels like, what a depression feels like. We look at each of the symptoms in and of themselves and describe them in plain English and what they mean, giving them real world examples of what it can mean. I mean, people talk about hypervigilance and they go, okay, well, who cares if you're hypervigilant? So you're never going to get jumped. You're like, no, you don't understand. When I'm at a restaurant or at a bar having dinner with somebody, say I'm on a date,
Yeah.
I am tracking every bit of movement. I am listening to every conversation.
Right.
And I get accused of looking at other women all the time because they are in the room. So I'm going to be vigilant. So, I mean, people ask how things can affect you. Well, you get accused of looking at everybody. And it's like, I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at her boyfriend because I'm
Yeah.
I'm
You're
doing a
scoping
threat
it out.
assessment on her.
Yeah.
And not to be sexist, I'm also doing a threat assessment on her because she may be some badass as well.
Right.
But, so we look at each of the symptoms one by one and just show them how they can impact your life. And then we also talk about the realities of PTSD, the stomach issues, lineups, the inherent road rage, parking lots, all those other things that the mental health manuals don't mention,
Right.
but are the absolute reality of your life. Like it doesn't mention anywhere that, by the way, you're going to have a real hard time just shopping for groceries. You're not going to be in it's like, no one told me that. So why am I crying in the parking lot of the supermarket? It doesn't mention anywhere in this book. But that's how PTSD manifests in real time in the real world.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of information that we're communicating to the people. We do a segment on R2MR, that road to mental readiness, where we show them the mental health spectrum, where they are on the spectrum. We show them approximately 20 coping skills, and we openly tell them 15 of these you're going to find are bullshit, and it's not the time for you to use them. But take a couple of them and start working them. And then when the time is right, you're going to go on another program and you're going to pick up another coping skill.
Right.
I say when I was 18 or 19 or 20, I had no time for yoga. That was for, and I used to say, oh, that's for, long-haired hippies type of thing, doing that yoga stuff. Now I probably spend about 3 hours throughout my day at various stages doing yoga as both a coping skill and a lifestyle. The most important thing we do at Valhalla is we give them a sense of connection.
Right.
We put them in a room with other people who are suffering, and we tell them to look around and realize other people are suffering. That sense of isolation that you felt, it's completely manufactured. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's a mind fuck. Total mind fuck.
And it's you now have a network. Everybody here understands what you mean. When you go, oh man, my stomach is not going well today, they know what that means. That means you're going to be running off to the bathroom every 10 minutes for no reason.
Right.
That's daily PTSD. We have somebody come in and we present on addictions. We have a doctor come in and we talk about the medications, on all the facets of medications, the pharmaceuticals, the good, the bad, the side effects. We have cannabis, which has now been recreationally legalized as well as medicinal.
Right.
We educate on the various components of cannabis and we destigmatize it. The pharmaceuticals are now coming back into research parameters. So those are other avenues that people can look to as far as that medication puzzle. And then we have those more holistic or home brews where, you've got like essential oils and witch hazels and vitamin D's and, all sorts of other components that aren't necessarily, you don't need a strict for, but have been shown to have therapeutic beneficial effects. So
yeah,
no one is going to be the same. No one is going to be all pharmaceutical or all cannabis. There's going to be some puzzle pieces for everybody, just figuring that out. Our program gives awareness to people. And with that awareness, you can venture out into the world, to use that risk management maxim. Predictable is preventable. Put a set of Depends undergarments or, in your car. Just knowing you have a parachute if you're going to walk into a stressful situation. knowing you have a parachute maybe gives you the confidence to get on that plane type of thing.
Right.
So when you put the things in place in a non-stigma fashion, you can carry on with your day. You're still going to have your panic attacks, but I can have my panic attack at the grocery store now and still wait my way through. I've spoken to people out in the community to arrange what I need to be functional in my day. I've arranged with my supermarket that when I get into that final lineup and I start to have a panic attack, I just started loading my groceries on an open available belt, and they're going to send an employee over to me. It's usually to talk to my service dog Maverick. But and to be honest with you, since I've arranged that bailout thing for me,
That's
I've
awesome.
never had to use it. Just knowing that I have that bailout gives me the confidence to now withstand that little bit of extra anxiety and see if I can work through it. Start a coping still, start my breathing, have a conversation. And there's also been times when I've been in line and I've been having a huge anxiety attack. Even in the midst of that anxiety attack, I still have the confidence where I've stepped out of line and said, hey, folks, I have PTSD and I'm having a really wicked anxiety attack right now. Is there any way I could butt in front of you? And everybody said, yep, away you go, and away you go.
Nice.
As you notice, I'm getting a little bit agitated right now where I'm starting to tear up. That's just the normal anxiety attacks that I just get overwhelmed on a regular basis. And I point them out just to show that I don't give a shit anymore. I cry in front of people. I don't care. And if they ask me why, I say I have PTSD and I can't handle being happy. And that was the hard part for me, because one of the things with PTSD is it takes away your ability to see those positive emotions.
Yeah, it does.
And then floods you with the negative ones. So when I see people having fun, engaging, or when I see something that's, positive, I just get overwhelmed and I'm like a 4-year-old having one of their happy tantrums because they're just so happy that they almost start crying. So that's me. That's my life. And essentially what we do is we try to normalize, to the extent that we can, all of the behaviors that are just so present in PTSD.
So you guys are having are you back to in-person retreats now? Yeah,
absolutely. We have run a total of 18 cohorts.
How often are you doing
cohorts. These? What's that?
How often are you doing these?
We are trying for once a month, 6 a year.
Wow.
So we have done 8 of these on Zoom. And then throughout COVID, we were able to run one in fall of 2020. Mm-hmm. In 2023, we were able to run one in the spring and 2 in the fall. And then this year, we managed to run 6, March, April, May, June, and then September, October. We actually finished our October cohort less than 24 hours ago. We wrapped up the cohort at 2 p.m. today at Cave Springs Camp.
So how many people would be in a cohort?
During a cohort, we will have 10 to 12 participants.
Right. And
then we will have 4 mentors. Mentors are people that have taken the program before, still participating 100%, but just kind of help me get the conversation flowing if that's required. And then we also have some other background activities that, we have them, can you check on so-and-so? Can you bring people in? It's very hard to run a program because timings are very ish in the PTSD world, and we get distracted. So I know I'm going into class in 5 minutes, and next thing you know, I'm watching a Netflix thing in another room. So that was one of the hardest things I had to get used to as the facilitator. And the other thing is people are going to, we're encouraging people to install boundaries. So if you absolutely need to have a nap, take that nap. If you need to step out of the room and take a breather, great. If you're having an anxiety attack, tell us. We'll all do a breathing exercise together and work through it. We'll carry on. Or have it in front of us. When I or any of the staff are having a panic attack, we advertise that. We tell people just to show and normalize it. Hey, folks, I'm having a panic attack. You don't have to flee the building. Just hold space for me. And that type of thing. And it just normalizes. So, and we say to people, it's not if you're going to break down on our program, it's just when. because you break down every day with PTSD. So why
Yeah.
wouldn't you do it when you're away at a program?
Yeah, for sure. Are the participants from like a cross section of all emergency services? Or are they mostly law enforcement or?
Uh, Emergency services, military. This cohort, we had a large influx of corrections.
Oh, good,
Um,
good.
all of our cohorts are co-ed. We have found that as a lot of other programs
That's interesting. Yeah,
don't do the
because
mixed groups. All of our
yeah,
programs are co-ed, and it's been amazing. The energy in the room it's the combined energy. You've got all those positive aspects of the mothering and the nurturing, and you've got all those positive aspects of being a father and stuff like that. And it's a really cohesive group.
so you've had no
We found it
issues.
works.
You haven't had any issues with that.
We haven't had any issues with that whatsoever.
Excellent. How is it funded? So, like, how do people pay to get into this?
Well, we don't charge for our programs.
Right.
There's no price tag, and we don't invoice agencies. We exist on the good graces of people. We
That's
have some
difficult.
revenue streams set up, but it's
Okay.
basically private donations.
Okay.
The region of Niagara has us as a charity of note for their annual golf tournament. But yeah, we're just starting to get out there, and it's private donations. Got Your Back 911 has been amazing for us.
They are amazing.
They've sponsored people onto the program. They've been a regular contributor to us. Just all these other organizations out there that are just doing amazing work, and they're very supportive of us. And more importantly, they have access to that demographic, so they're sending people our way that are in need of some help and understanding and some support, and that's what we try to give them.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, Jill and Sean are awesome.
Absolutely.
Great people. So back to you. I want to shift back to you, Graham, for just to for the end of this, but we're getting towards the end. What have you done now, having been through everything you've been through? What are some routines that you have put in place to own your growth, to maintain your wellness, that you know you need to do in order to keep that up?
So I've been diagnosed with complex cumulative PTSD, as well as severe anxiety and severe depression. So I got all of the words. So I kind of jokingly say this to people. So when I wake up from my last nightmare, usually at about 5 a.m, my battle with depression starts. And it is highly oppressive, it is ongoing, and it is active. The level of depression that I have, the amount of self-loathing and the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment. There's not a day that I don't wake up that I'm absolutely convinced that I have made up my PTSD, that I'm faking, that I'm a coward. All these negative thoughts just coming right at me.
Right.
I literally start my day with a gratitude exercise.
Perfect.
And it's an engineered exercise where I am literally trying to find something that I appreciate in the world. For this week, it's been a good friend of mine, a colleague. She's had a death in the family, actually a second death in the family, all in the same week. So my heart goes out to her. And the most important part of the gratitude exercise, because we can keep it personal, but why not share it? So when I do my morning gratitude, I then get on my cell phone or I open my email and I send that person a message saying, hey, just want you to know that you're in my thoughts. You're important to me. You were the reason that I got through school, reminding me of my deadlines. And I just want you to know, the space in my heart that you always hold. And I send that off. And usually within about 10, 15 minutes, I will get my reply. I've never had somebody go, oh, would you stop bothering me with your bullshit? No,
Yeah.
The sentiment you get back, I'm getting overwhelmed right now just thinking of the reply that she gave me, because she always replies with a similar type of heartfelt sentiment, even if it's like, it makes my heart warm to know that you're thinking of me, type of thing. So the gratitude exercise, when it's done, can just be so enabling. Last week, the recycling guys, they see that I have veteran plates. So the
Right.
recycling guys brought my bins back beside my house.
Nice.
So I emailed the mayor, just said, hey, I don't know who this should go to, but my recycling guys are like awesome. For a job that, everybody's supposed to hate, these guys took pride and da 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 da. And, just last week, my recycling guy comes up to me, he goes, we got a message from the mayor. What are you doing? I said, you did a great job, man. You make my life easy.
Yeah.
Just those small little efforts. And I want you to know that I'm thankful for you. I want you to know that I consider you a professional. Everybody kind of looks down sometimes at people in society.
Yeah.
But then the garbage strike happened and everybody, they were
Yeah.
the hero.
Then you realize how important those people are.
Absolutely. So, daily gratitude for me. But as far as getting through my day is a series of small little tasks.
That's right.
It's a daily to-do list. I drink a glass of water, I get a check mark. My goal is to have 8 glasses of water because I know I have to be hydrated. I have to eat something. I have to do my yoga. I have to do my exercise. I practice my instruments. All little 20-minute things that I can do.
Right.
And what I say to people, and I encourage them to do this daily to-do list, it's when I'm having an absolute killer depression day, my goal is to get 10 check marks on that list. When I'm having a normal day, I want 15. And if I'm just firing at all cylinders, I want every check mark. I want all 25 of them. And eventually, these small little tasks, and every time I check something off, your brain gives you a little dopamine hit.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the end of the day, now it's 5 or 6 o'clock, and I'm like, I've actually done some shit today, and I forgot to be depressed.
Yeah,
that's
a good way to put it.
That's a good way to put it. And pick on myself and call myself a piece of shit all day because I've been doing 20 minutes at a time. I've been doing things.
Right.
And I've been reaching out to people, and a check-in with somebody gets me a check mark. I actually have a notation on there, fluff, bracket Netflix. So literally catching up on my Netflix show is something that I plan. I don't do it for 12 hours.
Right.
I try to control my thing, but I give myself those little treats. And hopefully throughout the day, I manage to get some stuff done. I generally don't leave the house, but I have a personal goal.
Right.
I've created a SMART goal for myself that I make a goal that I will leave the house every day. I got to tell you, there's some days that I don't, but generally speaking, I'm usually successful 4 of the 7 days a week. And to me, that's a victory. Cause cause I could order my groceries right to my door.
Yeah.
But I force myself to go out and get those groceries, to interact with people. Maverick's an amazing dog, so I have to kind of share him with the world at times. And, everybody likes to see him and say hello to him. So,
right.
And that's one of the things that having a service dog does. Behavior activation. It gets me out. And there's certain things that I have to do owning a dog because that's a responsibility that I have. And that's one of the beautiful things of having a service dog. If I have an anxiety attack, he'll get my attention. I have to come down to his level. I have to start petting him, and that gets my breathing going. So
right.
Lots of tools that I'm always kind of working. And that's the strongest thing, besides the sense of community and not being alone, is we've shown them a multifaceted kind of approach where it's coping skills, it's awareness, it's a knowledge of your addictions and your medications. And you still have to do your therapy and your support group. But that education and awareness is that huge component that we really need, because otherwise PTSD is just a sense of confusion. Every other major issue that people can have medically, they leave that doctor's office with a roadmap and like 8 to 12 other appointments. Like, if sadly you get diagnosed with cancer, you still at least have a roadmap of appointment specialists to see. You walk out of your psychologist's office after being told that you have PTSD and you're like, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
I don't even have anybody that can prescribe me the meds.
Right.
I don't. And
No.
it's this self-guided tour of a strange land that half the world doesn't even know exists. You didn't even want to go there, but now you live in that world and there are no roadmaps, and you're just, what do I do next?
Yeah.
What we've done is come chat with us for that 5 or 6 days, and we're going to show you a little bit of that roadmap. These are some of the things you can do to prevent the big flameouts and the huge mistakes that I made not dealing with my PTSD. I was diagnosed for 5 years before I even told my employer.
Right.
You know, I kept getting myself assigned to different assignments that were every bit as high speed as the other ones were. You know, I got off the road and went into the detective office. You know, throughout my life, it seemed I was always going to bureaus that had that high speed, that high energy. I did 5 years on the bomb squad, realizing that pretty much every call on the bomb squad is a traumatic incident by definition. You're popping up onto that unknown, reconciling your own mortality as you're doing your work.
Yeah.
That's the definition of a traumatic call.
I think, I mean, you've nailed it as far as the gratitude thing is big. I've often thought of the whole gratitude exercise as bullshit. As like, this is fucking nonsense. But it's not. It isn't. Because there's something that happens when you make a point of intentionally writing down or saying out loud what you're grateful for every day. There is something that happens, and it may not make sense, but it does make a difference. That, along with, you know, your checklist of little tasks to do throughout the day, is awesome. I think it's important. It's important to not beat yourself up if you don't, you know, if you only have 3 check marks for the day. And I think you're doing great at that.
But here's the thing with these check-ins, if I tell people that I'm having a depressing day, the people that I'm telling are not going to let me off the hook with 3 check marks. They're going to say, how many check marks you got? I got none. Well, drink a glass of water, you dumb fuck. You get a check mark. Have a slice of toast, get a check mark.
Right. Make your bed.
5 minutes of yoga, get a check mark. Hell, we're having a conversation, a check-in, that's a check mark.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know what? We often miss the check marks that are probably throughout the day, right?
I've actually found myself, I've already done stuff for the day, and I'm like, oh shit, that's not, and I've added it to my to-do list, like laundry, and then I come back 20 minutes later, and then I cross off the laundry, and I still get that benefit. Even though I put it on the to-do list after it was already created, I can still create that thing. And that gratitude thing, it is so strong because the Delta cluster of PTSD brings us into that depression. And it literally blinds us to positivity.
Right.
That last symptom in the Delta cluster says we cannot see positivity in our life. We have to search for that.
Yeah.
And the gratitude makes you search for that. And then I know that when I send that message, that is absolutely going to brighten somebody's day. How can anybody be told, by the way, you're awesome and you've made such a big deal in my life, and not have a smile on their face?
Right.
There's no way that somebody can say, hey, that Sean guy and that podcast he does, that is saving lives. And there's no way that that's not going to make the corners of your mouth go up. And it's going to make that Grinch's heart grow 3 sizes.
Yeah.
And then
that's true.
You know damn well that they're going to send you that reply back saying, you know what, you know, like my good friend replying saying, you know what, I think about you all the time, and just knowing that you're thinking of me is awesome. Yeah. And then it's like, you tell me what you need. I'm probably going to send you like a gift card to order in some food and stuff. You've fostered positivity in the world. Yeah. And one of the things we say about PTSD is it's diagnosed in the brain and the body, but it's absolutely cured through the heart. Yeah. You have to access that positivity around you. To quote Manuela Juno, the world is a benevolent place. Yeah. We just have to learn to see it, because PTSD has blinded us to it. But We can do things to get ourselves out there. When you realize that if you go out to that social engagement, you are going to have a good time, as opposed to sitting at home because you're afraid to go out and then beating yourself up because you're afraid to go to parties. And it's just a spiraling.
Yeah.
Get out of the house, do that activity, and you're going to realize that life is absolutely glorious if you give it a chance and you really try to connect with it. But that depression is going to convince you that you're not worthy of it, and you have to fight for it. And it's a daily battle.
You have to tell your brain to shut the fuck up and do it anyway, right? You got to do that. Absolutely. Very well said. Graham, if people want to reach out and find out about Valhalla or anything else about you, how can they get a hold of you?
Valhalla Project Niagara. .org, all one word, no dots, slashes, anything like that. We tried to take the confusion out of Niagara, or Valhalla Project Niagara at org or .org.
Right.
Is our website. All the contact numbers are there. We're just finalizing the dates for our cohort next year.
Nice.
And there's a potential that we're finalizing the dates for a Zoom program in December.
Okay.
And we may actually, if we can convince ourselves, we might actually be trying to see if we can run one in January live.
Nice.
If we can get the facility up to snuff, so that the directors aren't going to freeze, then we will run a program in January potentially.
Perfect. Now, before I get out of here, Graham, I have two questions. These are my final two questions. The first question, because people say this all the time to people, but I think it's just a habit. They're not really looking for the answer behind it. But I'm going to ask you this sincerely. How are you today?
I say to people, I am my normal. I'm having a really rough go today. Depression is kicking my ass, but I'm fighting it. I've already gotten out of the house. I'm a volunteer firefighter in my home community.
Right.
And that gets me out of the house a couple times a week, gives me a sense of relevance. I realize, I may still be exposed to certain situations. Not that I call shop, but I do to make sure.
Yeah.
But I find it gets me out of the house. But to answer your question, I'm having a rough day, but I've already got a bunch of check marks.
Yeah.
I've already done my gratitude. I've already got 10 check marks for the day. So I've already won my battle with depression because I'm having a really rough day. I am.
So well said.
Great, and I think answer. I've had 4 or 5 kind of, little mini melts, as I call them, or I get agitated in front of you. And that's just my normal. I don't get stigmatized by them.
It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Here's my second question. So now, after everything, if you were to go back to your younger self before your first deployment with the forces, is there any advice you would give yourself? Anything you would say to yourself?
One of my old training sergeants used to say, each case takes a certain amount of hours. You can put the case into your casework, or you can put the time into when you're on the stand being cross-examined. If you do your good work, like before the day of trial, that makes the day of trial easier. So what I say to people is put the time into yourself now so that you don't have to put the time into dealing with your PTSD when it evolves.
Yeah.
It is absolutely prevalent in all of our professions. Critical incident and traumatic stress. You have to deal with it. You have to recognize that it's there. Take it seriously. Do the coping skills. Do the debriefings. Work it. I am basically an example of critical incident stress management not done properly. And the end result is PTSD.
Yeah.
And I was a member of the peer support team. I did all those debriefings for people.
Right.
I didn't have them myself.
Yeah. And
that's the one regret, is that I would have taken my mental health more seriously. I always knew it was there. But the biggest takeaway is I would have reported it to WSIB the day I got diagnosed.
Right.
Not 5 years later. because the clock starts ticking, and you open yourself up to so many resources once you put that report. You can put that report in and don't have to take a day off work, but it's reported.
Yeah. Well
Put
said.
those work injury reports in.
You mentioned your PTSD, and because what I say now is, I'm not fighting my PTSD anymore. PTSD was not my end of career medal that I always aspired to, but I earned every bit of that PTSD. It's mine. I own it. I don't, I observe it. I don't connect with it. I make sure not to, not to form my sense of self around it. It's not who I am, but I earned it through my career for sure. And I don't, I just make sure not to fight it. And that's huge, to just accept it.
Yeah. I know that I have PTSD. I know what it's going to throw at me.
Yeah.
Predictable is preventable. But yes, I'm like you. My identity is not PTSD.
That's right.
When I'm really battling my depression well, I know the quality of the person that I am, and I know that PTSD is just a component of my life that I'm dealing with. It can be very prevalent at times, but it is just a component of who and what I am.
Yeah.
But it has given me the conduit to meet some amazing people, to gain some amazing knowledge, and to really have some personal growth. I take part in every cohort that we deliver. I may be starting at the front of the room delivering a lot of the information, but the introspection, I take part in fully. So the amount of personal growth that I have been forced to have to acquire has been amazing. And now I look back at it from that post-traumatic injury as in fact post-traumatic growth. I never would have seen myself as being this type of person. I used to almost look back at, I'm not a counselor, I'm a cop. Well, no, now I have transitioned into that more. I used to be a stoic who thought, the showing of physical prowess and was what made me the measure of a man. Now I realize that the size of my heart is truly what is the measure of me on earth here. So I know I've got my passion. I know I speak very passionately and animated about this because it's something that I care about. We've got that Mission 22 down in the States where they say that 22 veterans commit suicide every day down in the States.
Right.
9% of the population accounts for 20% of the suicides. It's a problem that just has to stop.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to be a resource that, when you're languishing out in that dark mental health landscape, we're going to try to be that lighthouse and bring you in and give you some skills and give your therapist the time to unwrap all of your traumas. We're just going to try to show you how to be stable and survive PTSD so that you can realize just how beautiful and benevolent life can be out there. And you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. That's the most strongest recurring theme that we have from the time they sit down. And by the time we just get through the introductions and people are like, wow, I'm in a room full of complete badasses here that have taken on the world and conquered it, got injured along the way, but they're here.
Right.
And, and we're supporting each other. It's just amazing, that transition I get to see every one of our participants go through. And every time they kind of get a little light bulb or something like that, like a little switch has been flicked going, wow, a little tidbit of understanding. I get that same amount of personal growth. I cry all the time in front of the participants. We kind of have a joke that it's a competition between me and another one of our mentors, or who's going to cry first in anybody's.
Right.
And remember, again, no one's telling stories about their traumas. We're telling about victories in our lives of overcoming the adversity or connection that we found, or just realizing that someone's been an amazing friend. We have a challenge known as fill your seat. People want to pay back and stuff like that. And we go, you want to pay back? Get somebody to fill your seat for the next cohort. everybody knows somebody that's out there languishing, struggling.
Right.
Come on in and chat with us. We have people that have been and taken the program 2-3 times
Okay.
just because it keeps helping them. And sometimes they have a recharge and come back as a mentor, and your heart's going to grow every time, and you're
Nice.
not alone.
Well said, brother. Listen, Graham, I love what you're doing. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to learn about what you're doing. I've been waiting for this for a while, but thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
You're
Please keep doing it. It is needed. We need more of these types of programs, not less. Like you said, it's not a competition between programs. We need them all. They all fill a certain piece. But thank you. You're impressive. And I'm blessed to sit here talk to you and to learn about you, but just thank you, sir.
I appreciate your sentiments and what you're doing out there, and educating the mental health landscape is every bit as valuable. And again, all of our programs are supporting each other. We're not in competition with each other. I give huge shout outs and props to Project Trauma Support. I openly say that they saved my life. I sent my brother there. They saved his life. He hasn't drank a drop of alcohol since he went there 5.5 years ago. Sorry, 5 years and half a month ago. I sent my brother to Project Trauma Support.
Wow.
They're all out there. They're all working. Boots on the Ground, another amazing organization. Beyond the Blue. All these organizations are just crushing it out there, and giving that sense of community out there. And the same thing in my local community. We have so many sponsors that are just calling us saying, what can we do to help your program?
Nice.
We do a field trip day, and we've got one of the wine tour companies that provides us transportation throughout the whole day, bring us around. And it's just, hey, thank you, you're welcome type of thing. It's just the amount of support we've had is just amazing. And I say that we're doing this on faith, and we have an honorable cause, so nothing can stop us. And we're just going to be, we want to be a force to be reckoned with, and we want people to know, come to us and whatever you need, and we're going to refer you to the best agency that's going to take care of you. And if we're not the fit for you, then we're going to find and try to help you find somebody who is a better fit for you.
Beautiful. Graham, it's been awesome, brother. Be well. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll always be here if you have some new things that you want to announce. You're welcome anytime, but just keep doing what you're doing, brother. Love it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And it's been great talking to you, Sean, and keep up the good work on your side of the microphone as well.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure's mine.